Project MKUltra was the codename for a series of clandestine experiments exploring the human mind performed by the CIA. One of the main experiments was intended to find methods for controlling a person's actions, without them being able to remember what they had done, otherwise known as mind control. The files of the project were destroyed after the true nature of the experiments were uncovered, but some information was found in financial documents that had been forgotten. Project MKUltra began in 1953, and its counterparts Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke were started soon after. The exact dates are unknown, and the project was supposedly halted in 1973. The CIA apparently hired several Nazi scientists who had been working in German concentration camps during World War II. They had been conducting experiments on people in Auschwitz, Birkenau, and other concentration camps. They used Jewish people, prisoners of war, disabled Germans, and many other innocent people in their unethical experiments. Obviously, the subjects in these experiments did not give their consent, nor did many of them know that they were going to be experimented on. Dr. Edward Wirth, the head Nazi doctor at Auschwitz, led these experiments with the intention of developing ways to aid the German war machine, advance medicine, and enforce the radical Nazi ideology of eugenics. The defeat of Germany in World War II and the Nuremberg trials led to the creation of the Nuremberg Code of Medical Ethics, which forbids the cruel practices that took place in Nazi concentration camps and banned all medical experiments on any person without their consent. While the Nazi doctors' practices were completely unethical and inhumane, many of their findings have been used to develop modern medicine and treatments. There is still a large debate on whether or not the use of their findings is justifiable, but the data has been put to good use in some medical fields. The US was not so cautious about the morality of the Nazis, because after the war had ended, they immediately arranged to bring over 1,600 German doctors to the United States to continue their experiments, this time with the aim of discovering methods to control people's minds via LSD and other psychedelic drugs. Project MKUltra began shortly before the Cold War started, and the United States hoped to beat the Russians in discovering methods of mind control. It is unknown whether or not the Russians were developing similar technologies themselves, but the US wanted to ensure that its opponents did not get the upper hand. The technologies and techniques that were being developed by the CIA at the time could have been used to extract information from spies and prisoners of war, as well as force people into unknowingly following orders. Stephen Kinzer, a journalist and author for the New York Times, believes that the project was a continuation of the work begun in World War II-era Japanese facilities and the Nazi concentration camps, with the purpose of subduing and controlling human minds. MKUltra's use of trimethoxyphenethylamine on unknowing test subjects is something that originally began in the Dachau concentration camp in Germany. People were told that they would be helping to develop a cure for the common cold, when in reality they were given extremely large doses of psychedelic drugs and experimented on. Many people were permanently impaired or injured. Scientists involved with MKUltra were very interested in drugs that would allow people to control the human mind. One document describes the various aims of the project in a list of objectives, which included substances which will promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness, substances that could increase the efficiency of reasoning and perception, materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier, materials and physical methods which will produce amnesia for events preceding and during their use, physical methods of producing shock and confusion, substances which produce physical disablement, substances that would produce euphoria, a material which will cause mental confusion, substances which promote weakness or distortion of the eyesight or hearing faculties, a knockout pill that could be administered in drinks and food. The ideal substances and materials that Project MKUltra hoped to create are mostly unrealistic. However, they came across one specific magical substance that they believed could achieve many of the desired goals: lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD. LSD is capable of giving the user intensified thoughts, sensory perception, emotions, and visual and auditory hallucinations. LSD connects with serotonin and dopamine receptors making its effects much faster and more intense than other psychedelic drugs. The effects typically begin within the first 30 minutes of ingestion and last up to 20 hours. While chemical addiction is not possible, the drug can be extremely dangerous, and increased tolerance can lead to a need for higher doses, which can eventually cause impaired mental health. The CIA found out about this superdrug, and after some research and experimentation, decided that they wanted to buy a large quantity. A New York Times article from 1976 states that, in 1953, the Central Intelligence Agency discussed purchasing 10 kilograms of LSD, enough for 100 million doses. Although the declassified documents do not establish whether a purchase of that amount was ever made, the CIA was worried about the Russians and other foreign intelligence agencies developing methods of mind control and similar tactics, so it is claimed that they rushed to obtain as much of the drug as possible. Even though the documents do not specify how much LSD was purchased, several purchases were documented from the world's main supplier of LSD at the time, Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland. The article also notes that the 5 documents display a shady pattern of CIA experiments in the 1950s and 1960s on behavior modification in human beings through the use of drugs, radiation, and other methods. The CIA was operating in hospitals and universities across the nation, often without the establishment being aware of what was happening. It is unknown how many people were experimented on, but it was confirmed that one person, Harold Blauer, died during experimentation. He unknowingly took a high dose of LSD in a glass of liquor and jumped out of the 10th-story window of a New York hotel. Along with LSD, the CIA also used cocaine, coffee, marijuana, alcohol, insulin, and chemical truth serums on their subjects. The scale and nature of the experiments are mostly unknown, especially because the shredding of the files was ordered by Richard Helms, Director of Central Intelligence, shortly before his resignation. Many of the records and findings of Project MKUltra, Project Artichoke, and Project Bluebird are gone, and they will likely remain a mystery forever. The project did have one lasting impact on the US, with an increased quantity of LSD and other drugs entering into the country. With the purchase of the undisclosed amount of LSD for the CIA and the later dissolution of the project, this potentially leaves an extremely large amount of drugs sitting in government storage. The article also states that the documents do not disclose what has happened to the CIA's vast store of LSD and other hallucinogens. It is a popular theory that the termination of the CIA's psychedelic experiments and the abandonment of the large amount of drugs are correlated with a rise in public drug usage and the birth of the hippie culture, which happened around the same time period that the project supposedly ended. Another popular conspiracy is that the project never ended, and that the shredding of the files and announcement of the termination of the project were a cover-up to continue the experiments covertly. This theory also suggests that the project could be connected to the large number of people who go missing in the United States every year, and the idea of a government cover-up is a widely held theory. It would be very easy for the CIA to continue their experiments underground without anyone knowing, as the organization as a whole is potentially much more powerful and widespread than most people suspect.